Welcome, everybody, and glad to see so many people out for our webinar on TritonGPT. I am Vince Kellen, the CIO here at UC San Diego, and I'm going to be joined by Brett Pollak, who is our master of all things AI, and Allorah Pradenas, who's been our master of the business user community and working very closely with us on many aspects of this. We'll have others from the team probably jump in as needed. Feel free to put some questions into chat. We'll try to take questions, but probably a little bit towards the end. For those who are here, this talk will be somewhat more technical, but then we're going to get into our use cases and lastly, collaborations and talk about some of the other universities that we are already partnering with on TritonGPT. Let's go to the next slide. And the outline here is real simple. We're going to talk very briefly about our strategy here at UC San Diego for how we're doing AI, especially in the administrative and educational realms. And I'm going to spend a fair bit of time, probably 20 minutes on the architecture. This should hopefully delight the techies. For those who aren't so technical, you can fall asleep or grab some coffee and come back. But if you're interested, certainly stay. And then I'll be turning it over to Allorah on assistance and use cases, and then Brett to talk about our roadmap. And then we'll come back at the end on collaborations. Go to the next slide. First off, the UC San Diego strategy for AI is very clear. We're going to focus AI on our data, our content, our business processes. So we call that vertical AI, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Horizontal AI could be considered a general chatbot that's just general purpose, not necessarily tuned or incorporating all of your data or processes. And many of us use those tools. In fact, I use 2 or 3 of those tools throughout my week regularly. Instead, we're focusing on this vertical AI. We're also implementing what we'll call small AI, meaning we're focused on open source models and software. We're focused on what we'll call the engineering at the floor of cost, and getting remarkably good results, even relative to the very big AI houses out there, by comparing the performance of what our AI is doing. And then most importantly, because of the volatility in the market and how this might all settle out over the next 3-4 years, we're keeping our options open and also trying to avoid over investing. I've written a little bit about this, and so you can find it over in LinkedIn, as well as many other people have been writing about both big AI and small AI and open versus the big AI houses. Next slide. The concept of vertical AI is that once you start to get the AI working with your data in your context related to your business processes or teaching processes or educational processes, you're now hopefully distinguishing your institution, your organization from many of the others out there who are doing the same thing. And I think that's really the sweet spot for the AI. It's also the hardest to get to for many organizations because, in a way, all roads lead to data integration. One must get that data integrated or available to the AI in order for it to be used. So in a way, many of our AI projects look like very standard system implementation projects. We're trying to look at the business process and how to get data from point A to point B. Go to the next slide. I'm going to dip into the architecture now. And next slide. First off, as in all things, user interface is very simple. We've got a great partnership with a startup of some UC San Diego alumni called the company name is Dancer. And they have an open source software, Dancer, which you can download and use. We're using their sort of an enterprise version of it that enables more connectivity to different forms of content, among some other features. And that's been our primary interface, and it looks like anything else. We use the term assistant to describe specific use cases and how a user can come in and launch an assistant or ask questions of different assistants. I won't get too much into the assistant discussion because that'll be the land of Allorah and Brett. Next slide. This is a bit of an eye chart, but for those who are technical, bear with me. And for those who are not, double bear with me. On the left side, you can see clearly that we have faculty, staff, and students. We've enabled TritonGPT for all of our faculty and staff, 38,000 people. And so we bring all of them in. Not all of them use it. As you would expect, usage is very Pareto distributed, with 25% of the users consuming 75% or so of the overall cycles in the system or capacity of the system. In the center of this is our dialogue engine, Dancer. That's the user interface, and you can think of it as a form of retrieval augmented generation, RAG architecture. But it also does many things. It lets us pull content in from our environments here, our content management and enterprise content systems, et cetera. So we can pull things in from different things like Jira, Microsoft Teams, Wikipedia, et cetera. We have an API service for all this. All this whole architecture is very modular, and Dancer is modular too, and has its own API layer for us to interact with it. And as we go further to the right, up on top, you'll see this thing called API Gateway. We're using an open source API Gateway tool called WSO2 API Manager. And that kind of fronts how we talk into Dancer potentially, as well as how Dancer speaks out to our inference. From there, you see another box called Stained Glass Security Protopia. This is work we're going to be doing in this quarter. By the way, everything I have on this diagram, if it's in blue, it's either in place today or will be in place in the next couple months. Everything in the green box is going to be calendar year next year. So gives you the idea of our timing. But Stained Glass Protopia is a very interesting tool because it can non-reversibly encrypt what is presented to the dialogue engine before it hits the language model, the inference engine. On the right is our inference engine. We use Llama 3 as our workhorse, but we can and do use frequently some other models. Our inference, as well as our dialogue engine, is OpenAI API compatible. So if we want to, we could reach out to the more expensive services from the cloud providers. On top of all this is a very interesting optimization tool, again, coming out of the UC system out of Berkeley, called VLLM. It's a very intelligent caching optimization piece of software that speeds up and economizes the use of the language models. Very clever tool coming out of Berkeley. And you're seeing a theme here. We're trying to tap into tools that are coming from the UC system. In fact, the Protopia tool is a faculty startup out of UC San Diego, which is now in the quadrants for Gartner as a very preferred IP protection tool. So between Stained Glass Protopia and the VLLM, those are UC faculty startup things. The Stained Glass Protopia is also good for IP protection in case we do go out to an external AI house like Google or Anthropic or OpenAI. We can encrypt there, even if we do have contracts there. That's a way of ensuring that whatever is sent to the inference engine cannot be reversed. Now, that's a critical thing. For those who are into cybersecurity, you'll probably pause and you'll spend a couple of days scratching your head. A unique property of large language models is they are neural networks. And if you give neural networks a little noise, sometimes you improve, sometimes you degrade their performance very slightly within a very narrow band of a few percentage points. But the benefit is you can get non-reversible encryption. So if I take the content that I confessed to my dialogue engines, put it through Stained Glass Protopia and tried to reverse it, it would look like gibberish. We're asking, why would it look like gibberish, but why would the inference engine be able to understand it? It's how neural networks work. Further down as I go back to the left here and at the bottom, you'll see we have external stores of data. So we can get at different aspects. Certainly our websites we can get at. We can get at things like Wikipedia if we wanted, Google Docs and G Drive, et cetera. Those all come with our Dancer interfaces. We also are now in the middle of enabling access to our data warehouse environment, our activity hubs, and starting first and foremost with our finance activity hub. We will be working with a third party on enterprise content. We have millions of documents in our Highland On-Base system, and our goal is to be able to retrieve them, bring them into the dialogue interface, the dialogue engine, and let the users interrogate and otherwise analyze or summarize what are in these very large repositories of documents. We're right smack in the middle of doing work on structured knowledge retrieval, and much more on that in the coming slide. And that's a partnership we're doing with Wolfram. That's the Mathematica folks that we all know in higher education. They have some very interesting tools for visualizing, analyzing, and providing reasoning capabilities that are, very unique. And in fact, parts of the AI ecosystem use Wolfram tools for this. In fact, if you use Perplexity AI and ask a mathematical question, it's most likely going to call out to Wolfram. And on the far right side, one of our use cases is looking at the inclusion of Microsoft Teams to kind of build a bit of an execution workflow. And that's really around legal documentation summary, and that'll come up a little bit later. And so this gives kind of an overview of the overall architecture. We have we're using LangChain to some extent, and it's available to us fully in our environment. But we're also going to be looking at inclusion of knowledge graphs, and we've done some early experimentation with some no-code workflow development tools, LangFlow specifically, that may be of interest to our community down the road here, because it's a way of building sort of a retrieval augmented generation architecture without having to dip down into code. That gives you a high level of the architecture. And on the top, I didn't mention the vector stores. That's a place where content goes to be indexed so it can be more easily retrieved in the AI engine. And then, of course, the dialogue engine has its own repository of things it needs in order to do its work. And so there's a couple of stores that are listed there. Let's go to the next slide. We think one of the most promising things for TritonGPT and for frankly all of AI is going to be access to relational data. Right now, AI suffers from hallucination effects. Even if it's small, it's a bit niggling and problematic. And the last thing you want is to have a hallucination on retrieval of very crisp data that has to come from a data warehouse environment. And so we're solving that problem as we speak. So we're going to be using TritonGPT for our users who want to get questions answered about their balances and funds, the ability to use the dialogue interface, express it in natural language. And then the architecture will turn that into SQL, retrieve the answer from our relational data warehouse, and then further present it, visualize it, and or send it to Wolfram for further analysis. Some technical points. It's very hard to do SQL generation unless you enrich your metadata beyond what is typically found in an ODBC, JDBC data source of a column name, column width, column type, etc. You really need to have much richer descriptions so that the user's questions, natural language question, can be converted into that query. And so we've been putting that into our metadata systems in the activity hubs. It's very often useful not just to describe, what does this column mean, or what does this view mean, or what do these group of columns mean. It's very helpful to the LM to give specific examples of some of that data that helps translate the user question into SQL. So we're going to be putting in and have been using different sampling methods, getting unique values for common lookup fields, for example, randomly selecting values, or choosing a list of values based on their frequency of occurrence. This whole metadata curation process is an interesting one, and it's one that everybody's going to have to solve, and it's not going to be necessarily easy, even with the big AI houses, because sooner or later they're going to have to tap into all of the data in your environment. Just for comparison, we have over 14 billion rows of data in our activity hubs. That includes 15,000 columns of data across all those domains. Those are unique columns. And we have 550 ways of looking at all those columns in all those activity hubs. So the very large surface area of 14 billion rows in our architecture is distilled down to a rather small number of views and a small number of columns, which means a large number of columns, which means that every view has a large number of columns, which also means the AI has a lot to work with to translate a user query into a SQL statement that can retrieve data. We're handling all sorts of things that you would imagine in terms of both context filtering, meaning filtering the rows so that the user is knowledgeable. If I come in, I got a grant, I ask TritonGPT, hey, what's the balance of my grant? It needs to know who I am. That needs to restrict my view of the world to me so I don't have to go through the bother of telling it all the time who I am. So we call that context filtering. Obviously, there's a security context there that can be applied to row context filtering. We're doing the same thing with columns and controlling columns a variety of different ways. But we also have some very interesting enhanced privacy protection and security methods in our activity hubs by virtue of the SAP HANA environment. Most importantly, the use of anonymity, diversity, and differential privacy. I won't go into those. I'll let people read about that later. Those come kind of automatic with the activity hubs, and we can include them as we see fit at any given time. So more work that we're doing to get this out in the next couple months, but so far everything is looking quite fascinating. Next slide. On this fact retrieval side, as you can kind of see, this is the way that we envision it going. So I can imagine a user coming in to TritonGPT, say it's a PI, who has a series of grants, or more importantly, their fund manager or accounting person, says, hey, what are the remaining funds on my project and how long will they last based on my current spend rate? That's exactly the type of question that this architecture is going to handle, which is retrieval of the actual data from the activity hub, and then the use of the Wolfram EPC Enterprise Private Cloud, which actually runs entirely on premise within our environment here, and then uses also parts of that Wolfram architecture to then turn that question into crisp answers. Next slide. Another thing that Wolfram can do is visualize the data for us. So turn it into charts and pie charts, among other things. We have access in the Wolfram EPC to their entire knowledge base. So a lot of their own knowledge is curated in their architectures. We also have access to Mathematica and all the statistical machine learning and AI libraries in there. And our goal is to enable scripted data science pathways entirely through the dialogue interface. So somebody could say, hey, retrieve the rows, the transaction rows from my grant, analyze it based upon the category of the spend, like we see here, and then find me, a formula that sort of predicts over the last year how my spend rate has gone, especially compared to my last projects. That could be a true data science workflow that would be even more predictive of how grants are performing or how anything is performing. That can be repeated within the Wolfram and TritonGPT context. So the goal here is to let the user save all of that work and then replay it quite easily. Next slide. Our execution framework is starting with a use case that's related to helping legal and contract teams get a jump start on analyzing and redlining legal documents. And that workflow is going to kind of start in Microsoft Teams. And so we're going to have an execution arm to this. One thing to get answers, it's nothing to instruct the LLM to go do something, like go fetch a legal document, go redline it, bring it back, let the user then make a copy of it. And that's our execution framework. And there'll be more uses to this. We've done a little bit of experimentation with Quali Build, which is a no-code development from Qualico, the higher education software company. And the goal here is that we can initiate reach out from Quali Build into TritonGPT to enhance what's going on in Quali Build and vice versa. Have TritonGPT essentially reach out to Quali Build to trigger a workflow of some kind. and then be able to do that in any environment that has sort of workflow patterns. Underneath, we're using, again, open source software, Apache Kafka and Airflow to handle a lot of this orchestration, which is quite fascinating. This is another area of growth for AIs, and that's the execution framework. So you'll often hear the term RAGE, meaning retrieval, augmented generation, and execution. And so I think that's going to be a big growth area over the next couple of years, especially as we try to use more AI to automate more business processes or more educational processes for faculty or their assistants who have to prepare and build and conduct and manage their courses. Next slide. Safety came out of the gate as a concern for us right away. And through our architect, Jack Brzezinski and Adam Tilgman and others, we've put together a rather interesting approach to safety in which we periodically evaluate the safety of the system by using what we call an ensemble of experts. So there's actually multiple models that are participating in the analyzing prompt input and output, and in using rubrics that have been developed by the community, the research community writ large, to look at many, many topics of safety, some of them listed here. The overall safety score is collected and evaluated, and we're going to be automating all of that, again, using Kafka Airflow so that we can more, at a faster pace, or maybe in a more than daily pace, evaluate safety on an ongoing basis near real time. Undoubtedly true near real time, but it'll be certainly frequent. What would you do with this? Well, you'd identify unsafe prompting. You'd be identifying unsafe context documents and uploads. You'll be identifying errant behavior coming out of the environment. Typically, what you're going to really find are probably, benign documents that don't need to be involved in the system, need to be deprioritized or removed. Obviously, it'll be used to guide our overall TritonGPT design. Again, very interesting approach to safety for evaluation of the ongoing behavior of the system. With this, I'm going to turn it over to, although we can pause we got a few minutes for questions here. We got a big one. How does the cost that UC negotiate? TritonGPT is we'll say it's at a double-digit fraction of the cost of the OpenAI solution. So we'll say 1/8 to 1/12, depending on what prices you're looking at. It's really low. And so why is it really low? Well, it's inferences. We've done a lot to engineer the floor of cost to speed it up using tools like BLLM and our own cleverness around the NVIDIA architectures that we are inheriting and working closely with our San Diego Supercomputer Center on. This is not a trained model. This is a pure vector database and in context. So we haven't done any fine tuning or generation of a de novo model. We've gone very far just on that. I don't expect we will probably get into fine tuning. Mathematically, fine tuning may not be better than the in context approaches that we'll be taking advantage of. And any others? No, have we gotten pushback? No, because the goal for this the goal for this, and our chancellor has been very clear, our goal for this is to help our workers here save time, to give them a bit of their life back, especially over the last several years of work, and to improve processes, not to reduce workforce. So no, that's very clear. And we are keeping a human in the loop at all times in this. Yes, we have all sorts of interesting controls on P3, P4 data, certainly P3 data, but P4 coming soon. Brett, you got a question?
Yeah, sorry. Just to kind of piggyback off that, Vince, is that, one of the approach that we're taking here with the on-premise kind of deployment, at the outset, our chancellor and leadership were very in tune with wanting to make sure that we could distribute AI equitably across the campus. And so that really was the idea behind it, is that, we're not allowing just departments that could afford it to be able to use it. It's distributed out and funded centrally so that everyone could take advantage of TritonGPT. So just to that point, too, just about cost, and then also just about equity, and then making sure that everyone can benefit from it.
Yeah, and the private data, especially we'll call P3, P4, slightly different class. The most important thing is to make sure the content that you bring in to the vector database is scrubbed and clean. And so the last thing you want to do is pull in very sensitive individual information into the vector database. Now, once you get into context, meaning retrieval of a document live in context, slightly different matter, and that's where Protopia comes in, because should we ever have to go outside, we can scrub it. This entire platform runs inside our supercomputer center in a very air-gapped way. Not totally air-gapped, of course, we got to get in, but it's a very sequestered, containerized approach. And we're about to do a pilot with Amazon on how we can fail over or burst into the cloud. So in other words, keep our costs super low because we can run it on premise, but still allow some failover and bursting into Amazon for short periods of time. Amazon's all game for doing that. It'd be a great example of a very good hybrid AI platform. By the way, we're not the first to do this. Our supercomputer center has been doing this with high performance computing workloads for some time now. I'm going to turn it over, get back to some of these other questions, and we'll get to collaborations on some of these other questions.
Thanks, Vince. Thank you. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Allorah Pradenas. I'm Assistant Vice Chancellor and Chief of Staff to our VC CFO at UC San Diego. And I also oversee an internal consulting team called Operational Strategic Initiatives, or OSI for short, that has been helping with the AI implementation at our campus. So working more on the business side, helping people understand what we're trying to accomplish, gathering what their needs are, what the type of requirements they would have, and really translating the ideas so that we can understand what's the feasibility, can we do these quickly, and are they going to meet the needs of the campus, and really help, as Vince was saying, help us be more efficient and really make sure that we're addressing the needs of the campus. So next slide. And just to note, I am not as technical given my background. So Brett, feel free to jump in on any of these if you want to add any color to them. But these are the lists of the AI assistants we've built out in TritonGPT. Really exciting stuff. We have the UC San Diego assistant, which has been, it's pretty much the default when you go into the tool, because that's where people are going. You could use lots of other AI tools, right? But when you have it trained on your specific university policies, processes, the help documentation, we have lots of knowledge-based articles that people have to go to find information. When you can go into an assistant like this and just get direct answers, it's really, really, really helpful because it's been trained specifically on our university. So you can help generate new content and brainstorm certain ideas, but it's using UC San Diego specific content. And what's really nice in TritonGPT is that we have references. So you can go to the source of that information. So anybody who types something in is looking for something specific, can also go and verify that information after they get a response. We also have the job description helper, which is also a really wonderful tool that I personally have used quite a bit because it's trained on all of our position career tracks templates. And what that does is it allows a hiring manager to go in when they, let's say they're going to hire for a position, they need to rewrite a position description, and it walks the hiring manager through a series of questions to help write that position overview. It's incredibly efficient, incredibly fast. It's probably something that lots of hiring managers don't want to have to sit down and do. You only have to put minimal information in because it's already been trained on all of the different career positions at our campus. So it produces a position overview. Oftentimes when I use it, I tweak a few words. It's that good at producing a job description. And we've heard lots of folks who've used that who really enjoy that tool. We also have our general AI assistant, which is more just beyond UC San Diego training, just it's scouring sort of the web, right? What you typically encounter in other tools, but it's inside TritonGPT. So nobody has to leave to go use that type of tool. You can also just say, hey, generally, I want to use, look across the internet and find more information. And that's really helpful for doing all the kinds of things we've been using AI tools for, but summarizing documents, generating, writing content, that type of thing. We've also recently launched our Fund Manager Coach, which for our campus particular, we went through an enterprise system renewal. We have lots of new systems, and with new systems comes lots of new policies, procedures, controls. And one of the things we heard from our fund managers is that it's difficult to find information, and the information changes frequently. So they're not constantly going to a website to find information, or they're not constantly reading these newsletters. So in this particular assistant was a way to help our fund manager population, but also anyone who has financial policy questions, wants to know more about our financial procedures, to go into that tool and be able to find information more quickly. And this is a pretty heavy area of compliance. We work with lots of research sponsors. So a lot of the guidelines around our contracts, all those things change frequently. And we really wanted a way for our finance staff to be able to find information quickly and just get to those most current up-to-date compliance items. So this one is one that we've been working closely with the business users to find out how it's working, how we can refine it, what we can train it on that would be more helpful to them. And then I know Vince touched on both of the next two, the contract reviewer and the fact retrieval. Both of those are in proof of concept right now, but both very promising in terms of if we can use our assistant to create a playbook of rules to say, if you see a contract like this, or if you see a legal document that has these terms, this is how we would prefer to write those terms, and be able to redline that type of document for a user. And then similarly with fact retrieval, being able to go into the data warehouses, do SQL generation, and really produce information quite quickly that then can also be turned into visuals. So we're really looking forward to seeing how those play out in the proof of concept phase. The other assistants that we have in development, you can just see at the top, we're working on lots of different things at the same time. We're really trying to be nimble and just produce things and let the campus tell us what it is that's working, what it is they need, and look for ways to fill that for them. Next slide. I wanted to share just a little bit. This is our internal intake of ideas and review process, but I just wanted to share this with you so we can have anyone submit an idea. We have what's called the AI in Administration Work Group, which I'll talk about in just a moment, which reviews it. And the IT group, the business group, and whatever stakeholders might be involved, and my team, OSI, is going to look at that, work with the submitter and say, okay, what is the feasibility of generating this particular idea? And we'll get some additional input from other business stakeholders as needed. Then it goes to the AI admin work group for prioritization. And it could go to proof of concept, some do, but it could also go straight to project, depending on if it's just low-hanging fruit and we think we should do it and we have the capability. Next slide. I wanted to share with you, just not for thorough reading, because I know it is an eye chart, but just what it looks like when someone submits an idea. So you can see on the left, the intake form. We try to keep it really simple because we don't want it to be a barrier. We want people who just have a great idea to be able to submit it. We built this out in our Koale build form, which means that it will work through the approval process on the back end very rapidly. But basically, we just collect very simple information. Where are you from? What's your idea title? And then what problem are you trying to solve? Or how would this help the organization? That's when on the back end, you can see on the review side on the right, that's when we start to look at our team assesses the impact, the benefit. We start ranking high and low. We're also looking at the tech alignment. Can we actually just do this technically? And then the non-tech alignment. Do we have a good sense of the business processes from this area? Are we able to assess whether or not this is going to be something that's beneficial for lots of the campus, small parts of the campus, all of those types of decisions and questions. Next slide. And then the output of that type of review by my team is something like this. So this is an example. We use these one slide sort of summaries to go back to our AI and admin work group and say, here's how we assessed it, here's what we gathered, and here's what we see as the process overall. If we do think there are AI solutions that should be considered, it might be that we think we should build that in TritonGPT, and it might be that there's a different viable vended product that we should explore. We also look at the desirability, we look at the viability and the feasibility. So we're really breaking that down for the work group so that they can assess the ideas and then determine which ones they should prioritize. Next slide. And then I just wanted to share this because we do have the AI and admin work group, as I mentioned, their charge, we knew that this technology was going to be everywhere. And as Brett said, we really wanted to make sure that anyone on campus could use it to be more efficient in their role. And we understand, though, that there can be risks, right? And that people will have concerns about using these types of tools, embedding them in their processes and daily work. So what we wanted this work group to really do was build awareness about what's available, what you can use, and what our AI strategies are for the university itself. And then really just understand and promote the published guidelines, because we do want to make sure people are up to date on how they should be using these tools and what's appropriate. And then finally, just really influence the safe application of using AI across the university. So promoting success stories, sharing when things have worked really well, or ways that we should do things differently using these tools. You can see the sponsors are pretty much at the highest level of the organization. We have the CFO and our CIO Vince here. We also have representation from across the entire university. So we were very intentional to make sure that we picked folks from across the entire university to represent their areas, to not only hear the information we're sharing and to look at the ideas, but also share back and really make sure they're sharing those success stories. And then we meet regularly. Originally, I think we were going to meet quarterly, but we found we needed to meet more frequently just at the speed of pace that we're moving with these assistants and the things that we're developing. It moves very quickly. So it's been a really great partnership across the campus. And I hope that we are able to launch many more assistants in the near future doing this work. And I'm happy to answer questions at the end, but I think I'm ready to turn it over to Brett to talk more about our roadmap.
Awesome. Thank you, Allorah. And I just have to say, it's been a great partnership that we've had with OSI. And the one thing that Allorah didn't mention is all the training and outreach and everything and change management that the OSI folks bring to the table, not just analyzing the different requests that come through and then create a nice package for us to be able to prototype against from the technical side, but just the outreach and communications that they've done. They've developed trainings that they've shared, both internally for UC San Diego specifically, but they've also made some of those trainings available so that anyone on the internet can actually take them. And they're super beneficial for anyone that's using any generative AI service. It's not just TritonGPT specific. So I definitely wanted to give them a great shout out for all that. So let's turn it over to the roadmap slide. Thank you. So this basically is our roadmap and kind of looking at, quarter by quarter, some of the accomplishments that we've had over the course of the year here. And so in preparation for our campus-wide deployment, kind of in the April and June timeframe, we implemented single sign-on. We got some seed funding from the chancellor's office to be able to prepare for this in terms of, some really, high quality, relatively expensive hardware that allowed us to deploy this across a population of about 37,000 people in May 15th. So we targeted, everyone on campus, and, we've kind of talked a couple different times about equity in distributing AI in the hands of as many employees across the campus as possible. So our campus employees, including our student employees and our health science employees, all have access to TritonGPT through their single sign-on. I skipped over Fund Manager Coach. We've talked a bit about that. That's been a really nice process because knowing that there are so many different roles across the campus that are distributed in nature in terms of where they live, having a central source for them to be able to reference as we've done outreach and communication about fund managers and how their jobs have evolved over the last couple of years based on some enterprise system deployments. That's really helped us being kind of a complement to some of the training and resources that have been made available by our business and financial services group and Office of Contracts and Grants and Administration, sitting side by side with, these presentations and office hours and all of that. So it's a really great mechanism also to get feedback from fund managers about how we might be able to improve it and what features they would like to see, which kind of generated this whole notion of doing fact retrieval, because by and large, we saw that fund managers thought it was great that they're able to reference their policies and procedures related to doing their job. But ultimately, they thought, gosh, this would be great if we could actually get information that are on the reports that we manage with their PIs. It could help make their jobs much more efficient and not have to kind of fire up Cognos or Tableau or whatever kind of reporting tool that they use to generate that information. So this has been, kind of the impetus for a lot of that work right now. In late June, we upgraded to the major release of Dancer. We've referenced Dancer a couple of different times. It's a great tool, orchestration software. There's an open source version, enterprise version, different options in terms of hosting. Either it could be hosted by you, like we're doing right now with the enterprise version, or you could pay for kind of a software as a service model with Dancer. So Chris Yu Hong, alumni of UC San Diego, awesome company, and definitely have gotten a lot of notoriety, especially lately. They're growing and hiring, and so that's super awesome that we're able to partner with them. And so as we were kind of moving into some of our, July, September, what we kind of moved in through kind of the late summer and fall timeframe, Yu Hong and Chris are constantly putting out new versions and upgrades and things like that. So we're starting to take advantage of all those things. We had a major release that allowed us to be able to make available some new functionality that's been kind of sought after from the user community, which includes being able to upload documents directly through the interface and interact with them that way through the large language model. As new models are coming out from our open source software vendors, so we're primarily using Llama 3.1 as our large language model. Meta had a huge release that allowed us to take advantage of some improvements with Llama 3.1. We're currently running Llama 3.1 70B, the 70 billion parameter model. And we're just starting to evaluate the 405 billion parameter model as well, just to make sure that that's kind of compatible with all of the system prompts and assistants that we've deployed in the system. And it actually helps us along in seeing improved results, continued improved results, making sure that we're taking advantage too of the speed that we're currently seeing today. You'll see here in the middle, there's been some questions and folks have come to us about opportunities to be able to leverage TritonGPT, especially in the Cal State and UC system. We've obviously referred folks quite a bit over to Dancer, and I know some folks have experimented and probably even signed with Dancer. But we are offering to an alternative in which we would be able to run TritonGPT or a clone of TritonGPT as a software as a service provider. And we recently just signed UC Berkeley and San Diego State to embark upon that. So we're looking at kind of a 1 year kind of an arrangement where we evaluate the offering, and then they can make a determination of whether they wanted to move forward or do something else. And so we're excited to kind of get those up and underway. There are some webinars coming out that are sponsored by OSI. Our fact retrieval pilot, we're creating something called Enterprise Data Agent that'll allow us to do some of that text to SQL translation within that flow. So that's super exciting about something that maybe we're doing and developing as kind of a UC San Diego developed solution that'll interact with all of those different components that Vince was kind of talking about a bit earlier. So as we get into the later part of the year, we're looking at our deployments with our partners. That pilot for the document classifier, which is a neat tool that we're kind of using open source and then building some things and components and using Python packages to do things like redlining of documents that are the outputs of that rules engine that's being run against those contracts that are coming through the Teams workflow. So that's super exciting to get something like that out there, integrating different types of technologies and then running AI against those things. Protopia, Vince kind of touched on that stained glass kind of encryption software that we now have a contract with, so we'll begin that. And then looking at additional projects that are going to come down from our AI work group that Allorah kind of talked about. We're also then thinking about instructional use cases. So about this time, our faculty are currently working on guidance for kind of appropriate use for AI, generative AI, in the instructional space. And so as that guidance becomes available, we're eager to partner with faculty that are willing to look at instructional use cases where we might look at things like virtual tutors or assistants that help faculty create quizzes and other collateral related to their some of the things that they're using for instructional purposes in their Canvas courses. And then the enterprise content pilot, looking at kind of November, December timeframe that Vince was kind of pointing to with Highland OnBase and some of our big document stores. So let's see, I think that's all for the roadmap. Do you want to switch back to collaborations, Vince, and kind of discuss a bit about that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Since we started this work, we've had interest from certainly other universities and other actually places. And with our activity hub, especially student activity, we've already been doing that with the universities for a couple of years now. So we've kind of established an approach to our collaborations. And I think this leads to the question that was later, do you want to spin this out? No, we don't want to spin this out at all. It's not really meant to be a corporate entity per se, because we want to be of service to the community. So we treat this more as, collaborations between partners, to allow one, democratization, but two, tailoring, customizing, and further co-development where needed. And so it's really about service to the community, accelerate community adoption, share practical knowledge. First and foremost on our minds is being affordable. So we're really trying to do what I call engineering at the floor of cost. We're always committed to drive the price down. That leads us to open source technology and low-cost solutions wherever possible. We're focused on just core engineering, and so we'll talk here in a little bit. We've got a number of partners, basically system implementers and others who partner and can help with us and any of our collaborators. And then we also try to take a very rigorous, disciplined, and hopefully clever engineering approach that's focused on simplicity and parsimony versus boldness and breadth. And this is a complex area, as you kind of see from the architecture diagram. So keeping it breathtakingly thin and simple is very important early on, so that we don't pour too much cement around the wrong thing. Next slide. Brett already mentioned we've got some institutional collaborators. First, big shout out to the Supercomputer Center. All this work started years and years ago with us doing our machine learning cluster for education, our data science and machine learning cluster in platform for students. We have 10,000 students who come in and do forms of AI and that sort of work in that cluster. And that was a derivative, literally a copy of some San Diego supercomputer architectures that they use for their national labs work at scale. And so that's been going back years. So big shout out to Supercomputer Center. And certainly we have expertise in our unit on that, but a lot of indebtedness to SDSC. We have two partners here that Brett mentioned. We got discussions with 5 other universities and state government. More to come on that should anything happen there. We do have software provider collaborators. The answer is a big one, Wolfram Now and Protopia. The answer is a UC San Diego student startup. They graduated a few years ago and are off and running with their company. Protopia has a little bit longer history, and they're off and running with their company. UC San Diego faculty member. We have a couple implementation collaborators who are right there with us very closely, Moran Technology Consulting and Slower Inc. And we expect to continue to tap them as we grow into more community collaborations. And we're very partner friendly on others. So we've been talking to all the major SI houses for years, for a few years now, on this particular topic, the consulting houses, I say. We're in the middle of pursuing extramural funding. So we've got in the works another multi-institutional grant that we're trying to work with a couple of our collaborators. We, as I mentioned earlier, this whole architecture is very container-oriented, very modular, different pieces. Right now it runs kind of in GPU land, but it's the way it's architected by Adam and others is to be modular, and you can relocate different services in different ways. So it's very flexible. But we absolutely want to, in time, bring the cloud failover and cloud bursting. I doubt we'll need much cloud bursting, but I think cloud failover will be important. Right now, it's not what we'll call a super mission critical app, but in time, AI will be. So it'll be like any other system that needs to have some options should there be some failure of some kind. And then we're going to be starting work with an interesting company called DataBank on enterprise content system integrations. Another treasure trove of content, vertical content, millions of documents in our Highland On-Base implementation. But we want to be able to retrieve that in such a way we're not held captive by the specific vendor's AI approach. We want to be flexible around potentially down the road adopting future or different enterprise content management systems. We have lots of topics for collaboration that are going to be popping up. I know one that Jack Rosinski, our AI LLM Whisper architect, PhD in AI and industry experience for 15 years plus. We've been working on this concept of, it's one thing to get knowledge from content. It's kind of another thing to get knowledge from people's heads. So this notion of knowledge elicitation, now it's being triggered by our fact retrieval because we need metadata on columns and rows and views of data in our activity hubs. But part of the puzzle is trying to get that knowledge out of people's heads, how to enrich it with LLM data, and then how to build a workflow around further enriching it. So we think this whole knowledge elicitation from experts automation track is interesting. It's actually a fundable research track. It's been around for a while in the software development world. And we think generative AI can give that a kickstart. We have in the Dancer framework, it emits live events, kind of like how Canvas emits live events. So we could do real rich real-time usability analysis with it. That's data that flows directly into our activity hubs. This notion of using TritonGPT and Wolfram Mathematica for students, independent of all of our enterprise data, is also very fascinating because if you're a biology major, why do you have to become a programmer? Why can't you use natural language tools to automate more of your programming tasks? And that's the whole concept there that we'll probably dip into for additional collaboration. We think this safety approach is going to be evolving over time, and that might be a very interesting point of collaboration, as well as the ability to use generative AI to go after open educational resources and summarize, synthesize, and regenerate content that might be tailored and specific to specific classes. That's kind of where we are with the collaborations and going to be expanding it. We're going to be at EDUCAUSE and scheduling some sessions at EDUCAUSE with anybody who wishes to be a collaborator of any dimension, whether it be a company that wants to collaborate like a Slower Marantech or Deloitte or something like that. Other institutions, we've had some discussions with corporations, so there might be some discussions with corporations on it, but maybe not. But we will be at EDUCAUSE and have time to field questions from the audience. The biggest thing we want out of this is to, whether people use TritonGPT or not is like the second thing. The most important thing is democratize access to generative AI and expand the adoption of it in higher education writ large. That's really our main goal. And let's go to the next slide. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us here. We're happy to answer it. And I think we had a question on, could you use this as a personal tool to automate some of your own work? And now with document upload, you can. And Brett, you might have some more to say about that, because that I've been starting to play with that. That's kind of interesting. I took some recent policy statements from the federal government and popped it in and started to do some synthesis of it. So
yeah, that was definitely a big ask from the community, is being able to interact with it that way. So being able to upload an Excel spreadsheet, being able to upload a PDF, a Word document, and use that as kind of context then for interaction, summarization, riffing off of it. I mean, that's a huge feature for folks. So, the other thing too is someone had asked a question a bit earlier just about, how do I figure out how something like this might benefit me and my job. And so what I've actually done is I've copy and pasted my job card in there with all my responsibilities, position overview and everything. And I asked TritonGPT, I said, how, based on my job, how can I look at a series of tasks that I would do in my day-to-day and where I could benefit from generative AI to make me more efficient in my day-to-day work? And that interaction really allowed me to uncover some use cases that I had never really thought of. And so it got us thinking about, gosh, maybe we should have an assistant like that. We have job description helper that has all of our job descriptions in the library. Perhaps we could leverage that and be able to use it so that someone could pull off their job card, or at least the template of their job card, right? Not the actual job card itself. And then basically allow generative AI to give them a starting point of how they could benefit from using each of the assistants that are in the system. So yeah, there's constantly new ideas. I think there's creative ways in which people are using it. And I think that's part of some of the change management and outreach that we're starting to do now.
And with that, if there's any last questions, feel free to type them in. We'll see if we can answer them. If not, we'll get back to you offline via email. And again, any other questions, I got Brett highlighted. He's our master of this AI realm, but all of us can be reached as equally as anybody else.
I was wondering why I got bolded there.
Because you're important.
Funny.
Thank you all for attending. Hopefully this was of interest, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.